Our guest today is Michael Soon Lee. He's the author of Cross-Cultural Selling for Dummies and also a nationally recognized speaker on the topic of cross-cultural selling and issues.
That's right, Reese.
Okay, so let's cut right to the chase. And what are the important things for small business owners to know about cross-cultural selling? I mean, why do you speak on this topic and write about it?
Well, I guess the question, Reese, is why is this important for small business owners? First of all, you got to recognize that this market, Asians, Hispanics, African Americans, Middle Easterners, and others, is a huge and growing market. 1/3 of all Americans today are minorities, and by the year 2050 or sooner, they will be the majority in this country. So this is huge, and it's growing. So if small businesses don't have a substantial part of their market that is those groups, they're missing out. They could do much better. The challenge is when a person from another culture walks into a store, comes into a company for a product or service, unfortunately, most untrained salespeople and business owners will unintentionally insult them at least 3 times in the first 30 seconds. So what they need to learn is, how do you treat people from other cultures and other countries with sensitivity to their culture?
Okay, and how would one go about that?
Okay, so what are the main three things that people do to insult people from other countries? Number one, they shake their hand, which we've been taught to do from day one, right? But unfortunately, in the new multicultural world, shaking somebody's hand could be very insulting. For example, for someone to touch a multicultural woman, a Japanese woman, a Middle Eastern woman, an Asian Indian woman, for example, that would insult her, her religion, and her whole family. So what you want to do when you meet somebody from any culture, regardless of what they look like, whether they're 5th generation Chinese American like myself or just got here, or they look like yourself. Maybe they don't even look like somebody from another culture, although you could be Latin, possibly.
That's true.
You never know.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is not shake their hands. Instead, just welcome them. Hi, Mr. Ludlow, welcome to our store, to our company. And then to hesitate for a moment to see what you do. Now,
If I extend my hand,
then I would shake it,
Right.
absolutely. But if you didn't, I would just nod and say, please, come on in. So that's the first thing.
I figure the nod is kind of a universally okay thing.
I'm acknowledging you.
Asians understand it, certainly.
Absolutely.
But I think even in our culture, we go, oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's a...
And if I didn't want to shake, I'd still go, good to see you.
Right.
And that would be absolutely fine. So number one, don't automatically shake people's hands.
Okay.
Number two, don't necessarily look for eye contact. In the United States, looking somebody directly in the eye is thought of as respectful, paying attention, and sometimes being truthful. If I can't look you in the eye, sometimes there's a thought that maybe I'm not being completely honest with you. But in other cultures, for example, the Native American culture, the Asian culture, many people don't look people in the eye to show them respect. What they do is they look down. That is the highest form of respect. But for Americans, people looking down is very uncomfortable. So an untrained salesperson will get uncomfortable and they'll try to get your eye contact. Don't do that. If they look down, you just look down and talk to them just like this. That's showing respect. And the third thing we do is we stand too close or too far away. In many cultures, they like a lot of personal space, more than Americans do. For example, Japanese people, they will nod, bow, or shake hands, depends, whatever you let them do, and then they'll step back. Now, that's a little far for an American. So what is your natural tendency, Reese, to do?
I'd probably take a step forward. Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I would assume that Japanese, being in a confined culture, would be used to even a tighter
No,
space.
they want their personal space. So whenever there's an opportunity, they're going to step back. If you step forward, though, you violate my personal space. And what am I going to do? I'm going to back up. You're going to step forward. I'm going to back up. You'll chase me all over the store. You don't want to do that. And so if somebody backs up, just stand there and let them have their space. Now, if somebody steps forward, very, very close, like people in the Middle Eastern culture, they like a very little personal space. In fact, they have a saying in the Middle East that when I'm talking to someone that I'm comfortable with. I want to feel your breath on my cheek.
Wow.
That's how close they want to be. But I can sense this is a little close for you, Reese.
Yeah, even
Now,
it's TV, what we call TV close.
yeah, and you want to back up. And if you back up, I'm going to follow you and I'm going to chase you all over the store.
Right.
So, number one, let people greet you and meet you the way they want. Number two, if they don't give you eye contact, don't look for it. Just look down, look away. Whatever they do, you do. Third thing you want to do is let them set the personal space that's most comfortable for them. That is the ultimate in customer service. Doing things the way that other people want them done. The customer wants them done. And if you do those three things, they're going to be a lot more understanding and forgiving if you screw something else up down the road, which we will talk about. But if you can do those three things, that says, those are three things I think you can understand that a lot of untrained people would do automatically and would start the relationship off on a very negative note.
Right.
And so if you do the things right, and basically do things the way they want them done, adjust to their culture, it basically says to them, I'm trying. Forgive me if I screw it up, but I'm trying to do things that are comfortable for you. Please do business with me.
Okay, so those are some great examples of things that you can do when you're meeting people face to face. But what can a small business do to actually market and get more people, in the door of other cultures, especially if you live in an area, I guess, where there's a lot of one ethnic group or another, or maybe a lot like this area, we have everything.
Well, the first thing you want to do, Reese, is to find out who is in your market area. And you can check the U.S. Census Bureau. They've got tract by tract numbers about culture and what kinds of folks are in your area. You could also survey people in the area and just ask them. You could talk to other business owners that are non-competitive to you and find out, what kinds of cultures are coming into your store. So if you find out, for example, that you have a lot of people from Mexico, then perhaps you want to hire one or two people from Mexico who might be able to speak the language, recognizing that not everybody from Mexico doesn't speak English. It may actually be the majority of folks. So you really don't know. So you've got to do your homework. Find out who are your potential customers. And then what generation are they in the United States? If they're first generation, it means they just migrated here from some other country. So their English language skills may not be that great. They may not know things about, American contracts, American products, those kinds of things. You may need to spend a little more time with them, educating them. If they're second generation, it means that they're the children of immigrants. So they probably speak pretty good English because they learned English in the schools. But they also probably are bilingual because they learned the language of their ancestors from their parents so they could communicate with them as well. So they probably speak that language as well as English. So they also make pretty good interpreters for the first generation. Third, fourth generation are the children of people who were born here. So they probably are very conversant in English, may not even speak the language of their ancestors, and may be fully familiar with American practices, culture, products and services. So again, you might ask people, what generation are you in this country? Along with that, though, Reese, it's very important that you find out specifically where are they from. It's not good enough to know that you've got Asians, because there's 13 different cultures that call themselves Asian. You've got Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Filipino, Thai, you've got Indians, you've got all kinds of folks. And they're all very proud of their own unique culture, and they also have their own unique languages, their foods are different, so they're very proud of their culture. So you've got to know specifically, do you have Mexicans? Do you have Puerto Ricans? Do you have Chinese, Japanese? Do you have people that are African American, or are they from Nigeria? Are your Middle Eastern folks from Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia? Where specifically are they from? Because you can really hone your marketing down, your customer service skills down, it makes it much easier for you to become a cultural expert just on one specific culture, but not the whole Asian culture, the whole Latin culture. That's a huge chunk for a small business owner to bite off.
Right.
So do your homework.
Right, and for marketing, you're playing with sort of the rule of larger numbers. Not everybody who you meet who's Asian is let's say you're targeting. There's a lot of Chinese people in the area. If you decide to target that market, that's for your marketing, but you're not necessarily the people who come into the store could not be that, even though you're targeting them.
Yeah, and probably the best way to figure that out is to survey the people who come into your store. And one of the questions, not the first one out of my mouth, but along with, what are you looking for? What color is it? What size? How many do you want? Can I ask you, where are your ancestors from? You might even say, I'm fifth generation, Irish American. Where are your ancestors from? Mm-hmm. Because they will tell you, my ancestors are from China, from, Saudi Arabia, from, Brazil. They're going to be very, very specific. And you just make a quick note of that, and you start gathering your own research data. Where are the customers who come into your store come from? The problem is, Reese, if they haven't been treated with sensitivity to their culture already, let's say you've been in business for 5 years and you're just starting to look into this, people may have been turned off already. They may have been insulted so many times by you and your staff when they came into your store by not being sensitive to their culture that the word is already spread out there in the community that you don't want to go there. They don't treat you very well. They insult you. They're not sensitive to our culture. You should try and find another store. So I would be careful about that as well.
Do you find that people do have those problems in their
Oh, yeah. Because I'll tell you, a couple of times, a few people go into a store and they don't feel welcome. The word spreads really fast. And you don't need the internet. It's just sort of like a person to person. The word just spreads exponentially that this is not a sensitive place to go.
What are some of the things that companies can do to make themselves more sensitive?
Well, first thing you want to do is train your staff to be sensitive to people's culture. And again, what we talked about earlier, greet people the way they want to be greeted. If they don't give you eye contact, don't give them eye contact. If they stand too close or too far away for you, let them set the distance that's comfortable for them. And then you want to ask them about their culture. And Reese, Americans are scared to death to even bring up the subject of culture. It's commonly, it's common to say, well, I don't want to talk about their culture because I don't want to offend them.
Right. You just figure, well, we'll just treat everybody the same.
Which you can't do. And I run into a lot of small business owners that I consult with, and they say, well, I just treat everybody the same. And I say, okay, so that means if I was totally blind, I had a seeing eye dog and a cane, and I came into your store, you'd probably just hand me a brochure to read, wouldn't you? Because you treat everybody the same. And they go, oh no, I wouldn't do that. I would help you. I would explain things. I would let you feel it and touch it. I wouldn't do that. Of course you wouldn't do that. You would meet the needs of someone who had a special need because that's good customer service. You don't treat everybody the same, and you can't. Because good customer service is not treating everybody the same. In the same way, people from other countries and other cultures want to be treated special. We all do. And so you've got to learn a little bit about people's culture. What about their language? What about their food? If you sell soap, how do people in that country use that soap? Some people in other countries around the world use bar soap to wash their hair. They don't have shampoo in a bottle. It's just different, but you wouldn't know that if you just didn't go on the internet and do a little bit of homework. Or even ask your customers, how do you plan to use this product? Why are you buying so much of it? Right. Just ask.
Well, the danger, I think, that people, why people don't want to ask is you don't want to fall into stereotypes. You don't want somebody calling you out, or worse yet, even just thinking it and not saying it to you is like, whoa, you're treating me this way because I'm whatever
Right.
So how does one overcome not feeling like you're stereotyping someone?
Well, I think it's important, Reese, to recognize that, again, the reason Americans don't ask is because we just don't want to offend people. The problem is, if you don't ask me, let's just take me for an example,
Okay.
because I'm sitting here.
Right.
If you don't ask me about my culture, the only option you've got is to make assumptions. Now, are you more likely to offend me by simply asking me where are my ancestors from, or making a series of assumptions about me?
Right. That's true. Yeah, I would definitely. Then you could tell me.
Yeah, because if you just say, oh, he looks kind of Japanese. I know some Japanese people who sort of look like him. You can say simply, so what part of Japan are you from? And I would say, you know, I'm not from Japan. My ancestors are from China. In fact, we've been at war with Japan for many years, and they weren't very kind to our ancestors. And you could start a whole world war just with that. Better to just simply say, Michael, can you tell me where are your ancestors from? Mm-hmm. And that way you're not stereotyping. What you're doing is you're asking that one customer, where are their ancestors from? From there, you can then extrapolate some cultural tendencies.
Right. Well, I could also add on to that question, like you said before. I could say, oh, and when did your family first come here?
And so if I said I'm fifth generation, that would indicate to you, I'm pretty Americanized, but you never know, no matter how long somebody's been in this country, how their culture impacts them, because it goes so deep. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so it can have an impact. You might even ask them, let's say you were showing me a home, you're a realtor and you're showing me a home, you might simply say, okay, so you're a fifth generation Chinese American, you speak pretty good English, you seem to know about contracts and things in this country. Are there any aspects of your culture that you believe impacts your purchase of a home? And I might say, well, I don't know if this culture or me, but I don't want to buy a home where somebody has died in it.
Now, that question that's a perfectly acceptable question to ask.
Absolutely.
How does your culture affect your buying decisions?
Does your culture impact your buying decisions? And I might say, no, not at all. Or I might have, when it comes to buying soap, I don't think it does. But with other issues, it might. And so it's okay to ask. And you got to recognize, Reese, people from other countries and other cultures who are not Caucasians, we know we look different than Caucasian Americans. Mm-hmm. So when we walk into a store or into an office, we know that there's a difference. I mean, frankly, when I walk into some stores, not around, California, but I speak in Greenville, South Carolina. I speak all over the country. And I walk into some real estate companies, or I'll walk into a store, a small little shop, and there'll be a little fear on people's faces. Not because they're afraid of me necessarily, or there's some stereotype. They're afraid that maybe because I don't say anything when I walk in, they're afraid they don't speak my language.
All right.
Oh my God, does anybody speak Asian here? So I will deliberately, when I'm thinking about it, I walk into a small shop in Greenville, South Carolina, I'll fling open that door and I'll say, hey, how y'all doing? And they'll go, woo, thank God that guy speaks English. All right, we can deal with this. But there's just, people want to be helpful, but they don't know that they speak your language or other things. But there are cultural tendencies, Reese. Not that everybody, so for example, there's a cultural tendency for Asians to negotiate virtually anything and everything all day long. Whether it be a house, a car, or a bag of bolts and nuts at a hardware store. They want to negotiate. So do a lot of other people from negotiating cultures, like Latins, like Middle Eastern people. So they'll try and negotiate everything. Now, does every Asian negotiate? No. But if you found one that didn't, it'd be a little odd. And so once you start to learn these tendencies, it can really help you to help the customer buy more products and services, feel more comfortable with you as a small business owner. It just really helps. And again, it's a huge and growing market that most small business owners are currently missing out on.
So does when you talk about the whole negotiating culture, that's the haggling and various
Yes, which
places, right?
Americans hate to do.
Oh, we hate it. So should we in our pricing structures and stuff be prepared to be able to give a little on that kind of thing? I mean, does that have to come into play?
It depends on what you're selling. If you've got, if you're a hardware store and you've got another hardware store down the street and another one over there, your prices are going to be pretty similar. However, you do need to be aware if you're in an area where people live who are from negotiating cultures, and again, that's mostly everywhere except the United States, Canada, and Western Europe. Here, we walk into a store, we see what we want, we pull out our wallets, and we pay exactly what they asked. In other countries, Reese, if you walked into a small shop on the beach in Mexico and you saw something you liked that was beautiful, and you pulled out your wallet and you paid exactly what they were asking, what would they say about you?
Sucker.
Gringo. Yeah, and bring your friends back too, would you, please?
But if I went into a let me just say a hardware store. I go into a hardware store in Mexico. I needed to pick up something, and there was a price on the tag.
If you didn't negotiate, they would think you're out of your mind.
Really? Wow.
Absolutely. Because it's part of the culture. In those cultures, in negotiating cultures, time is relatively plentiful. Money is precious. In this culture, time is precious. Money is relatively plentiful. In fact, in the United States, we have a saying about money that time is
Money.
money. And so we will pay extra to save time. But in other cultures, they will haggle over everything. So if you are in an area where you've got a growing community of people from bargaining cultures, and again, most of the Asian cultures, most of the Latin cultures, most of the Middle Eastern cultures, a lot of the African cultures, they haggle over everything. So you'd better maybe pick up a book on negotiating, well, like my book, Black Belt Negotiating, or get yourself a class or something else. But recognize, even if you had an 18-week, all semester long college course on negotiating, how much competition would you be against a 12-year-old kid from Mexico? They haven't had an 18-week class. How long have they been negotiating, Reese?
About 10 years.
Yeah, pretty much all their lives, maybe.
Since I could speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so recognize you're still going to be challenged, but you better get a class on how to negotiate so that you can protect your bottom line, because they want to negotiate.
Okay, so we've talked about people from other cultures with other languages and stuff, but then you have the African American culture here in the United States, and I have never really wanted to assume that they're anything but, like me, Americans with just a different skin color, which is probably a wrong assumption.
It is, because African Americans want to be treated special. Now, it probably wouldn't be a good idea to ask anybody who is dark-skinned, where are your ancestors from? If they speak English, if they have American-type mannerisms and dress, you probably are going to assume that they're African American.
Right.
But if they are, now obviously if they have an accent, you might ask them, where are your ancestors from? Because they're going to expect you to understand they have an accent.
They're obviously from another country,
Yeah,
not just
feel free.
African
But if they're dark-skinned, look like African Americans, sound like African Americans, they're probably African American. So then you want to kick in a different mindset, which means, how do I want to treat African Americans? Number one, you got to always show respect, which means you never call them by their first name unless they invite you to do so. It's always Mr. Lee, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Smith. They really want that kind of respect. They may not negotiate like somebody who's an Asian necessarily, or they may be good negotiators. Again, it doesn't necessarily translate, but you've got to recognize that they want to be treated special. And again, the tendency for African Americans is that they really like to be unique. So if you're selling a car and it's one of a kind, it's got all the bells and whistles, they might be more interested than the average person. So it can really help you to meet their needs a little better just by recognizing various cultural tendencies.
Okay. Now, when you say tendencies, this is an important point. Again, you don't want to paint everybody the same way, because obviously, I mean, especially, well, I shouldn't say especially. I think in general, tendencies are just that, you can't assume that all these things apply.
No, you can't. But tendencies are the habit of acting similarly because you come from a similar place. So, like I said, there's a tendency for many people from negotiating cultures to negotiate. Does that mean all of them negotiate? No. Does it mean that all of them want a particular product or service? No. But if there is a tendency, then, you can pretty much assume that I would go there at least to help meet their needs. Asians walk into a grocery store, do they look for ramen noodles? Probably. Do they look for tea? Probably. So, you want to put those items in one area where they can find it, those kinds of things. Does it mean they all head down the Asian aisle? No, I don't go down the Asian aisle of the grocery store, but if I need something I want that's Asian, I'll go down that aisle. I think the main thing, though, Reese, is you always want to treat every customer as an individual. But the way you know about their particular individual needs and wants is to ask them, like you would anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this area here is a very diverse area, and there's an Asian market in San Pablo that I go into, and they actually play Hispanic music, which is really odd. It's weird looking for your Japanese rice or your Japanese fish cakes and listening to like Shakira singing in Spanish, right? But I think I'm not sure if they're catering to the what they perceive as the dominant cultural in the area.
I suspect they are, but they're also trying to cater to other cultures as well. And it's absolutely fun.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. I get a kick out of it.
It is. What a great idea.
Do most people appreciate when you bring up culture and...
Absolutely. Again, don't forget, when one of us walks into a store, we know we look different. So I'm happy to educate you about my culture, because if you understand about my culture and about, kind of what I do and how it impacts me, you're going to be able to serve me better. So, for example, if you're a realtor and you're helping me to buy a home, you need to know, do I believe in feng shui or not? Because that will impact which way the house faces, maybe the number of the house, the address of the house, perhaps even whether there's, if I can walk in the door and I can see the back door, that might be a bad luck house for me.
Oh, wow.
If it has beam ceilings, is that good or bad? It really helps you to understand a lot about that particular culture. And every culture has its own unique beliefs and practices. And you can't learn them all in a lifetime, but you can learn about one specific culture and you can become the expert. If you've got a lot of Puerto Rican clients, you can, in a very short amount of time, become the expert in the foods, the language, the practices, the culture, and the beliefs of Puerto Rican people. But you've got to, number one, figure out who are the majority of our customers. Is there a large group that we could meet? Or maybe there's an unmet need out there somewhere. And maybe they're just not coming because we don't stock the right products or services. Maybe we could. Maybe we ought to go and talk to them, talk to their leaders. How can we serve you better? And that kind of, I think, takes us to marketing. How do you market to people from different countries and different cultures? Every one of them, they're all generally very tightly knit because they want to hang out with people who are comfortable with their language, their culture, their foods. And so they have their own community groups, their own churches, maybe their own business associations. And so if I were a small business owner, I would go to those associations, those churches, and I would say, we have this kind of store. How can we support your community? How can we get it involved? And how can we do more business and better serve the people in your community? And obviously, it benefits us as well. And so they'll ask you to maybe get involved with having a booth at one of their fairs, supporting the church in some small way, or something else. You'd be surprised at the opportunities that are out there, but very few small business owners ever get involved in the community. It's not enough to place a couple of ads in a newspaper or something else, because that says to them, I'm just here for your money. They want to know that you're here to support our community, not just for now, but you are going to be involved in our community for the long run. You're not just here for our money. You want to help support us and our community.
I get to know us and
And be part of the community.
especially for small local businesses.
Absolutely, a huge opportunity. Those big companies, they're too big to get involved, they don't have the time, and they seem very impersonal to a lot of personal communities. But small businesses, they'll support you.
Yeah, well, having done a lot of major corporate videos, the marketing folks will say, okay, we want one of this and one of that, and it's all, the casting is all according to have the diversity. At least they're recognizing it, but it's kind of like,
Yeah, but do they make a sincere effort?
Right.
Yeah, that's probably not.
Probably not.
And so that's why I always go back to the fact that you've got to get involved in their community. Be seen on a regular basis, and not just for a month, not just for a quarter, maybe not even for a year. It may be a series of years that you've got to be involved with them over and over again, which says, I am sincerely interested in supporting your community for the long term. I'm not going anywhere. We're here for you.
What about joining community groups that
Absolutely.
are but ones that are multi-ethnic? Like
That's fine too.
if you live in an area like we do, where the Chamber of Commerce is.
It's multi-ethnic. That's fabulous. Because then you'll have African Americans, you'll have Asians, you'll have Hispanics, you'll have Middle Eastern people, you have Lithuanians, you'll have all kinds
We
of
have
folks.
everyone.
Any group that can get you in front of those communities in a very efficient way is a great way to go.
And developing friendships and relationships.
And
with those folks.
relationships are everything. That's why you want to ask people about their culture, because it says to them, I'm interested in your culture. Teach me. And that starts to build a much deeper relationship than just, okay, you're here for a pair of socks. Here, I'll take your money. Here are your socks.
Right.
I'll never see you again.
Right.
No, I want you to buy socks. I want to make sure you have the right color, the right size, the right material that's comfortable for you. And then maybe you'll tell other people, and they'll bring more business, and they'll bring their friends and their family. And then I'll have business for a lifetime from one pair of socks. Unfortunately, small businesses, it's very just one transactional.
Right.
Don't do that. Build relationships for a lifetime. It's much more efficient and much more effective.
Great. And on the marketing front, let's just turn the tables here. What are some of the mistakes, the big common gaffes that people do in their marketing?
Well, let me tell you some of the biggest ones. A very large pizza chain in Los Angeles decided they would market to the Hispanic community, which is huge in Los Angeles. So they ran all of these ads in Spanish that we're going to have a special. If you call into this special number, we will get you your pizzas really fast. In fact, that's our key to delivery is, fast. Unfortunately, they hadn't hired anybody who could answer the phone in Spanish. So people were calling up speaking Spanish, and nobody could take an order.
They were running the ads in Spanish.
They ran the ads, but they were English and Spanish, but it was aimed at the Latin community, which is, in that area, a lot of first-generation folks who didn't speak that much English. So that was their first mistake, not doing their homework. What generation are they? Well, if they're first generation, you've got to have people that at least can speak the language. If they're second generation, they don't necessarily need you to be from my culture. In fact, Reese, it's a very little known fact that if they speak okay English, don't have to be totally fluent, but they speak okay English, they don't necessarily want somebody from their culture. In fact, they sometimes look for people not of their culture. Let's go back to the real estate example. I mean, a lot of real estate companies think, well, we have to hire a lot of, let's just say, Latin or Spanish-speaking agents. A lot of Spanish-speaking clients don't want an agent who may be Latin. Number one, because they know their culture too well. Let's say they're experts in negotiating. Well, they'll know all their negotiating tactics and be able to counteract them. The second thing is a lot of these cultures are very private about their financial affairs. So when you're buying a home, you're buying a car, you're buying a refrigerator, which has to be financed, any major purchase, many of them don't want to work with somebody from their culture. Because I've got to give you and I've got to tell you about my personal financial situation. How much do I own? What do I owe to other people? And if you're from my culture, you might take that information and spread it around our community. which I don't want people to know about my business. So I might work with somebody who's totally outside of my community because I've got a fair amount of assurance that you probably don't have a lot of links to my community. If I give you my financial statements, profit and loss statements of my own little business, you're not going to share it with my community because I don't think you know a lot of people in my community. In fact, it could be an advantage not to be from their community. So if they're first generation, you've got to have at least one person who speaks their language who could do interpretation. But very often, when people from other countries who don't speak much English are trying to do business outside of their community, let's say that you provide a product or service that isn't readily available in their community, and there are plenty of those. Legal services, accounting services, all those kinds of things. There's not a lot of that in those communities. There's not a lot of expertise in those communities. You need to have at least one person who can speak their language. But generally, if they're going to an accountant who they know is not in their community, they'll bring someone who can speak the language and do interpretation.
And how much of they're wanting to use you to learn English is going on?
They might be using you as a cheap Berlitz course too. Maybe they don't want to speak their language because they want to learn better English. You know, one thing you got to recognize, Reese, and I think our business owners need to understand that learning about culture is fun. It's fascinating to learn about different cultures, different languages, different foods, just how people do things, maybe their beliefs as well. But you don't have to learn them all. Don't get overwhelmed. Just figure out what's the largest group who might be my customers. And just learn a little bit, and then just learn to be comfortable asking people about their culture. Because once you get past that and just simply ask them, can I ask you, where are your ancestors from? They will give you the world's greatest education about their culture, their language, their food, and anything else, because they know that you're sincerely interested in learning. And they will teach you everything you need to know. And it's better than buying a book, because real living human beings are telling you or teaching you, and you'll remember it better. Because you'll remember that particular customer or that customer there taught me that little piece there. And you'll just have a wonderful time learning about different cultures. It's kind of like taking an around-the-world cruise without ever losing one piece of luggage.
Well, you know, and also I think, you know, I'm trying to think of certain instances where if you are targeting, if you know there's a particular group in your area, and they're your target market.
Yep.
And so one walks in, you ask them the question that you said, you know, where are your ancestors from? Then you could start to say, hey, we're a burger shop or whatever, right? But you know, are there some condiments that we should be adding?
Exactly.
Or, what would be something that would be good to you, because there's a lot of folks in your area from there, and we'd like to.
You're doing first-person research from the perfect person, the source. So,
nobody would find offense with that.
Absolutely not. Because basically, what are you saying? I mean, if you are a doctor and you've got magazines in the waiting room in other languages of the majority of the people who come to your doctor's office, I mean, because they can't read all these other magazines in English, but now there's one or two that they can read in their language, speaks volumes.
Just a small thing like that.
Little things make a huge difference.
One more thing, a lot of small businesses these days are involved in online businesses.
Sure.
So, your community is everyone. You may have specific target markets, or, it's just, there's no local geographic culture. It's everywhere. And so how do people market online to a particular ethnic group or make themselves inclusive?
Well, actually, Reese, online is even easier to do your homework, because you just go in and see, which portals are these folks coming from. And if they're coming from Asian portals or Latin portals or someplace else, then maybe I want to have, a special area for them in their language. And then I'll put, in addition to having things in their language, sort of the products and services that they want. And again, it's easy to do research online. Just offer a prize, answer 4 or 5 questions. You know, you could win a prize, or I'll give you a free discount, or I'll give you something else. Do your homework. But if you detect that you've got folks from other countries or other cultures buying your products or services online, why not have a special area? For Spanish, click here. For Chinese, click here. And it'll be in their language. So if I don't speak Chinese, hypothetically, and it says in Chinese, you know, for Chinese, click here, I won't even see it because it'll just be jumbled words. It'll be almost like a picture to me that I can't read.
Right.
I'll ignore it. I'll just read the English. It won't offend anybody. If it's in Spanish, I won't be able to read it. But if somebody, you know, speaks Spanish, they'll click on that. It's very similar when you, almost every company today, if they put you on hold or they have you go through a phone tree, one of the options is always Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. It's depending on where you live and where you operate. But most of us, when we hear it in Spanish, we don't even notice it. Because it says for 2, you know, for Spanish, press 2. Well, we hear it, we don't understand it, we just ignore it.
Right, right.
And it's the same way online.
I see. No, and these days localization services are everywhere. It can be done very inexpensively.
It's the optimum these days. Everybody wants customized down to the ground level as much as possible. And it's fairly inexpensive to do.
Yeah.
So that would be the next step. Once if I had an on-ground, you know, presence, you know, I had a store front or something like that, you know, I'd definitely reach out to the people in my service area. Then I'd look at my web traffic and see if I could then customize that as well, because then you'd learned a few things about culture by then.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking to us about this. It's an important subject that most of us probably don't give it as much thought as we probably should.
Yeah, and if anybody needs to reach me, they can get to me on my toll-free number.
Okay.
800-417-7325. 800-417-7325. Happy to answer questions if they've got them.
Terrific. And Michael's book is Cross-Cultural Selling for Dummies, and links to his website as well as to the book can be found at the bottom of this page. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks, Reese.